Hey, what's up, you guys? Bloody Jacob here to bring you my review of the 2003 science fiction horror film based off of Stephen King's novel, and it's called Dreamcatcher. It was directed by Lawrence Kasdan, and has a pretty loaded cast. Of course, this is continuing my trend of horror movie reviews for the month of October. And again, just for the overall goal and point of me making horror movies more of a presence on my channel, it's one of my greatest passions. So the month just so happening to be October is just an excuse for me to talk about horror movies more often. Yeah, this is one I hadn't watched before. And the main reason I checked it out was due to it starring Thomas Jane, and Thomas Jane is one of my favorite actors. I've loved him in everything from The Punisher to I'm Out With You to Hun on HBO. Quite a few other things as well. And I'll watch this guy in anything, And let me just say right off maybe I should explain the story briefly first. It is a Stephen King story, and it definitely has almost like It type of vibes to it. Because we see these group of friends, they've been friends since childhood, and along the way they sort of end up helping out this, supposedly weaker, younger kid who's being bullied and sort of beaten up and everything called Duddits. So they form a connection that lasts the rest of their life, but after they meet Duddits, they all gain these telepathic abilities. Which they use in various ways throughout their lives. They don't know how to really explain it. They all just share some sort of link, and like I said, the ability to read people's minds, which is both an advantage and a disadvantage. It can work well for you, but then it can just really stress you the fuck out, or just really get to you if you let it. Not that I would know, but and as we catch up with the characters as they're grown up adults now, they all have a fair share of issues. Thomas Jane's character, Henry, for example, he is a psychiatrist, I believe, or a therapist of some sort, and he ends up just sort of snapping a little bit on one of his clients and just sort of purposely bringing up things in his past that he knows about by reading his mind to sort of get to him. And due to that and certain other things, he almost kills himself at the beginning of the movie, but he's called by Jonesy, Damian Lewis's character, and they end up regrouping at this cabin in the middle of the woods and everything. Jonesy, meanwhile, he ends up seeing a child version of Duddits, and that causes him to get ran over, but this is some months later, and they meet up in the cabin. I'm not going to go over every plot detail, but there also turns out to be this alien parasitic type of life form going around this area as well, and it really turns into a different movie when that starts happening, but we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Let me just say, this movie's greatest strength is definitely its cast. That was definitely the highlight for me. Despite my mixed feelings as it went along, which again I'll get more into in a few minutes, the cast made the movie for me. Again, I love Thomas Jane. He's one of my favorite actors. I thought he did really well in the movie. He was likable. The whole cast was likable, from Damian Lewis there on the left. He's known for his work on Homeland on HBO, but he was also in Band of Brothers and, of course, various other films and such. He also had Timothy Olyphant there, who's known for starring in Justified, which I definitely plan to continue. And you have Jason Lee here, who is often seen in the live-action Alvin and the Chipmunks movie. Even he is really likable in this as well. It makes me want to see more of his work. But yeah, the whole cast, the main cast, has really good chemistry. Believe that they're friends. So I really, really like that. Then you also have Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman, he's in a ton of movies. Of course, everyone wants him to narrate their death and everything like that because of his voice. But he is definitely a very good actor. And in this, he's an alien hunter. He's been trying to pick these things off for a while. But because of all that, it's sort of driven him to like a more, I don't know if I'd call him insane necessarily, but definitely, yeah, he's insane. A more sort of focused on one goal, and that's eliminating Lem's state of mind. He doesn't really care as much about everything else. It's just driven into a really low point. So yeah, that's the basic idea there, and I'll explain more in a minute here. But I liked it. I really liked the first half of the movie. It's about it's a little over 2 hours. It's about 2 hours and 13 minutes, and I feel like the first half, I forget if it was the first half or like the first 20, 30 minutes or something, I thought were really good. This one feels like more of like a drama, type of thing. I thought it was really good just because of the cast and everything holding it up the way they did. Yeah, it would have been fine if it was just almost an I Melt With You story, if you guys have seen that with Thomas Jane. If it had just been about the human side of it, I think in ways it almost would have been better off for it, but of course this is Stephen King, so it has to have some kind of horror or sci-fi twist. And this guy, he's wandering around in the snow, and he ends up being taken in by a couple of them, to get out of the cold, but he ends up being infected by one of these things, and that's where, shit really starts going wrong. And when it does at first, it works. It's fairly intense, you're worried. It's a little bit silly when he starts farting because the parasites come out of their ass, apparently. So that's when it starts getting a little bit silly, but when the parasite and the aliens come out, it almost works initially. You see the death of Jason Lee's character, unfortunately, and again, you like the characters, you like the cast, so you do feel bad when each one of them dies. And Timothy Olyphant I liked as well. He's one of the more eccentric members of the group. There's an awkward scene of him earlier on trying to basically get a date by being able to find her. I think it was her wallet or something, but he ends up just creeping her out. But as I've been trying to say, there's a certain point where it goes a little bit overboard. It tries to be more than what it should have been, I think. I like Stephen King. I like a lot of his work, but there are stories of his kind of veer off in a more sort of weird and odd direction that doesn't always work. And this, unfortunately, becomes one of those a little bit into the movie. There's just these, when you see the powers, like with the finger and everything that Timothy Olyphant has, that gets a little bit much. And they try to turn it into more of like an alien invasion action movie kind of thing, and I don't really think it needed to go that direction. If it had just been about these friends in the woods in the cabin trying to survive this, sort of mysterious alien being, I think that would have been better if it was more like contained type of story. But instead we get Morgan Freeman's character, who again doesn't really necessarily do a bad job. Just I think that whole side of the story sounded a bit overboard for me. I would prefer it being again more focused on just them, the friends in the cabin. But as far as these alien things go, I'll bring up a couple pictures here. As far as effects go, the CG I thought was alright. Not like the best, but it was decent for 2003, I think. Definitely not the worst I've seen, certainly. And I thought the designs were fine, and there is a decent amount of blood, and I don't know if I want to say gore, but there's a decent amount of blood in this movie, and so that's pleasing to a certain part of my mind. There is a really good scene with Henry, Thomas Jane's character, where he's held by Morgan Freeman and his organization and everything. And there's a cool shot of Thomas Jane watching him from the fenced off area, and he's kind of getting inside their heads to listen to what they're planning and everything. And he ends up talking to one of the men and convincing him to let him out and go against what Morgan Freeman's planning. That's pretty much the whole annihilation, just without disregard, I can't talk, with disregard for pretty much everyone. Again, just sort of that blind rage that Morgan Freeman has against these things to a certain extent, and he ends up convincing him to go find Dowditz, and they do. And the actor who played Dowditz did pretty well as well, when he was grown up. But where it also kind of loses me and becomes a bit much, besides the whole alien invasion thing, because you see Morgan Freeman fighting these things and with the others in a helicopter and everything, and shooting missiles. There's a whole large ship. That was a bit much, but where it especially loses me a little bit is when Damian Lewis's character is sort of possessed by this Mr. Grey character. sort of one of the things inside him, this mist, and he starts talking this really over-the-top British accent, and I think Damian Lewis is actually British, but it was just really silly. It came off very campy, and maybe it was meant to be that way, but I just think it kind of paled in comparison to what the movie could have been early on. So I got a bit silly, and I ended up trying to contaminate the water supply to infect more people by infecting this dog and trying to spill him into it. And Thomas Jane and a couple of the others have to stop him. But Thomas Jane has a really cool scene where he comes back to the cabin. He sees Jason Lee's character dead and everything, and sort of this nest being formed, and he just burns it all. And Thomas Jane gets to show some solid acting chops on that scene, just with his expression and how emotive he is with his eyes. So I did still enjoy it. And it sort of ends a little bit abruptly because Doditsy ends up being another alien life form himself, hence why his friends got telepathic abilities. He ends up destroying the thing along with himself, freeing Damian Lewis's character, Jonesy. But then it just stops, so I would prefer another scene with Henry and Jonesy sort of having a funeral for their friends or something like that, or some kind of extra scene after that with them. I think would have been nice. But overall, if I had to rate this movie despite some of my criticisms for it, I would give it a B, honestly. If it had been a lesser cast, if Thomas Jane wasn't in it, and if the cast didn't work the way they did in the movie, it probably would have been closer to maybe a C or C minus. But because I love Thomas Jane so much and his work and most of the rest of the cast, it brought it up, and it held up the film a lot. So I'm still rating it a B. They made it that much more likable, and like I said, the first part of it is really good. I liked it a lot. And although it lost me in a couple of points, like I said, I still ended up enjoying it. I thought it was a good time. Maybe a bit too weird and silly. It kind of went the wrong direction, but I still plan on buying it. I wish I would have seen it sooner. So yeah, let me know what you guys thought about Dreamcatcher. If you've seen it, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, subscribe. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.